I think this is it. I think we are live. For the first time doing a solo live podcast over on YouTube. I don't even know why I've got these headphones in, to be perfectly honest, because they don't mean anything over here. So just give me 1 second to do one very quick thing. I'm going to record this separately as well, just for the podcast, which I'm doing is now happening, which is good. And so, welcome to episode 183, which is actually episode 1 of the Mindset by Dave podcast. There's changes. There are changes afoot. Today's episode is called Crafting Your Life, and we will get into the topic on that very, very shortly. But I kind of just want to very briefly go over the changes afoot. If you're watching this live on YouTube, this is obviously the first of my solo podcasts that I've recorded on YouTube. So this is a new thing for me. And it's part of actually crafting my life, to be perfectly honest. So welcome on over. If you're listening on the podcast, these interviews and podcasts are now all going to be available going forward on YouTube to watch back, or you can watch them live on twitch.tv/mindsetbydave. There's so many different options, and because we want to make the podcast more engaging, more interactive, we want to make it so that you can be a part of the show. So ultimately, that's what we're doing. And there's a couple of changes. One, there's a change in the design, which is just a little bit more up to date with how I like things to look now. 3 years ago or 4 years ago, when we got that last one done, we went for something that was a little bit classy, a little bit more sophisticated. That ain't me. And at the time, thinking about the audience that you're trying to reach and that you're going for, it's like that. Yeah, that isn't me. That's what I thought I was going for at the time. And one of my absolute favorite lines from my You Are Enough video is, "The journey evolves and you need to evolve with it." And this is me trying to evolve with the journey. This is also, again, 4 years ago. What did I think? I thought, I don't know if I'm going to be Mindset by Dave forever. I'm always going to be Dave Cottrell, though. So I thought we'd call the podcast Master the Mind, Master Anything with Dave Cottrell. Because I thought that's what you want to do. Long term, so very long term. Long term focus. I want to build up the brand of Dave Cottrell. Doesn't matter whether I want to build up the brand of Dave Cottrell. No one can spell Cottrell. No one's searching for Cottrell on Spotify. People know me as Mindset by Dave. You know, my mum said on TikTok that that's what she called me at birth. So there we go. So we've now simplified it. We're calling it the Mindset by Dave podcast, or affectionately the Purple Cast, because I don't know if you've ever come across it, but I've got a slight obsession with the color purple. So that's it. That's the great big change. It is in line with the fact that the previous podcast was called Master the Mind, Master Anything, and the idea there was to literally talk personal development tips. And even if that was obviously sharing people's stories about overcoming adversity and so on, but it was about sharing personal development tips, really. That was the prime purpose. And that will still be one of the purposes today. In fact, today's episode is personal development tips. However, it's not the entirety of what we're here for. And I feel like that's why, the last podcast episode before this break was with Wreck-It Raven, talking about racism. And I feel like the time has come that the podcast needs to be getting involved in more issues than just mindset, more issues than just mental health. Even though pretty much all issues are relatable to mental health. So that's what we're going to be doing going forward. We've got such a variety of guests coming up. We've got guests with autism. Literally last night, I spoke to a trans woman in the very early stages of transition, and one of her allies talking about the transition process and being an ally, and that's going to be coming up in a couple of weeks' time on over here. It's just exciting times. It's really exciting times. And that really feeds into why I wanted to make this first episode today of the new format. And I'm calling it mine. Lifecraft by Dave, I think, is on the thumbnail. But it's all about how to craft your life. And I want to start off with a John Lennon quote, which is, "Life is what happens when we are busy making plans." It's a quote that's kind of always stuck with me, because if we either make plans, or we make lots and lots of plans and don't live them, or we make plans, act upon them, and then we get something completely different. And making plans isn't enough. It's not enough to change your life. While you're busy making plans, life will hand you the default settings. And the default settings are whatever you kind of work towards at this point, life will actually hand you something. It will hand you... Life's going to carry on happening so long as you're alive. And we can either let life happen to us, or we can get out there, get proactive with it, and begin to craft the way our lives are. And the reason this is very, very close to my heart is I can be a very, very reactive person. And, being a reactive person obviously just means that you react to things that happen. You react to the hand that life deals you. And proactivity is something that only ever comes in fits and starts with me, right? I'll have periods of being proactive, and then I'll fall back, and then I'll have more periods of being proactive, and then I'll fall back, and I'll let life happen. And even sometimes, actually, in the life that I craft for myself, at times, I create pitfalls. I create the actual... There's a great question, and I've been wanting to ask everybody this question for a long, long time, but I've never quite had the guts to do it. And the question is, how are you complicit in creating the things that you say you don't want? How are you complicit? What is your role in creating the situation that you're in? And specifically, what is your role in creating the parts of the situation that you really don't like? And again, I'm not sitting here now saying that there isn't situations where life happens to people, especially when other people are concerned. There are things that other people will do to us, for us, against us. But in terms of Lifecraft, we have to sit there and say, right, which is the part that I'm responsible for? What is the part that I'm responsible for? And how have I maybe created the situation that right now is causing me misery? And I'll throw myself under the bus, because let's face it, that's what I do. I've done this time and time again over my life, because I like to go, when I find something that I'm interested in, I'm one of those people that goes all in on it. Whenever I've got really into a hobby, I go all in on it. Quite often turn that hobby into my job. If we look back, computing was one of my first hobbies, became one of my first jobs. Music was probably my first ever hobby, became my second major job. Fitness was a huge hobby for me, became the job after music. Now, I can't exactly say mental health's a hobby, right? It's like, how's mental health a hobby? But being interested in psychology, learning about the human mind, that was something that was a hobby before it became my profession. And that's one side of things. Because when we do have that all in on stuff, and when our entire life becomes all about that one thing, it can be very easy for us to feel, when that one thing doesn't work, that nothing is working in our lives. It's an expression I like to say, which is, a temple can't stand on only one pillar. And historically, I have got myself into a lot of these traps of crafting my life the way I don't want it. And I believe this is probably down to, I'm looking over my shoulder right now. If the microphone went a bit quiet, I'm looking over my shoulder. It's not on there anymore. Once upon a time, on my notice board in my office, and I wrote this on there as soon as I started CoFit. CoFit was my personal training brand before Mindset by Dave was my thing. And I wrote on there, entrepreneurship is living a few years of your life like others won't, so you can live the rest of your life like others can't. And I very much fell into the work harder, more equals 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 more. And the thing was with that what I would do, and going back to when I was in the gym, working as part of CoFit, I had that early success. I had a lot of clients, and I wanted to make each and every one of those things work. I wanted every single person that came in through that door, I wanted to give that person everything. I accepted everything. I said yes to every client. In the process of trying to live my life like others wouldn't, so that in a few years' time, the business would be built up to the level where I could live my life like others can't. And this mantra very much drove the way I made my decisions, but I'm a people pleaser. I'm an obliger. We've talked about this on the podcast before. I would do that at the expense of my own time. And particularly, the first thing to go out the window was my own time in the gym. Now, that was fine for like a week or like 2 weeks. That was fine. It was just okay. It's fine. It's not a problem. It doesn't matter if I don't get my workout in. Until it does. And the problem is, because it didn't matter on day one, I allowed day two to happen. Because it didn't really matter on day two, I allowed week one to happen. And then again, from week one to month one, I don't even know where the point was at which it suddenly started to matter. But the time that it begun to matter, and I was aware of the fact that it had mattered, if I'd have known that question right back then, how am I complicit in creating the thing that I say I want to avoid? What was the thing I wanted to avoid? I wanted to avoid feeling miserable. I wanted to avoid feeling tired. I wanted to avoid feeling burnt out. How was I complicit in creating being tired, being overworked, being burnt out, losing joy, losing interest in the things that I previously enjoyed, which ultimately all of those things are symptoms of depression. So, at a stretch, I could arguably even ask the question, how was I complicit in the resurgence of my own depression? What was I doing? How was I crafting my life to be like that? And this is the thing, is I sacrificed the short term at the expense of the long term. And this is necessary sometimes, right? We sometimes need to do that. Sometimes we need to put our eyes on the prize and see what is in the long distance and have big picture thinking. Have that long game in mind. And we can get away with it for a day, a week, a month, 6 months, a year. Depends on the person. But ultimately, at the end of all of that, at the time, I blamed a lot of things for the reason why that CoFit started to fizzle out. I stopped enjoying being in the gym. I stopped enjoying looking for more clients and all the rest of it. I had the same problem with the studio. I loved it at first, absolutely loved it. But after working 10, 12-hour days with other people's music, I lost all interest in creating my own. I ruined my own hobby. I created the situation where music stopped of being an interest to me. I went about 3 years without picking up the guitar up until about a year ago. And previously that was something that brought me joy every single day. And this is kind of what I want you to think of. I mean, your situations will be very different to mine, but I want you to think of that question. What am I doing? How am I complicit in creating the things that I say I want to avoid? The things that drag you down, or the things that cause you misery, how am I complicit in creating those? I'm not sitting here and asking you to take extreme ownership. I'm not sitting here and saying that you sit there and you take 100% ownership for everything that's happening in your life. But I'm asking you to sit there and analyze a little bit more about what bits you can. And maybe think about the things that have gone into the back of your mind and you've forgotten about that. Actually, you know what? I could change this here. Because that's step one. Step one is understanding what is causing the problems that are there right now. Step two is a lot more fun. I've done the doom and gloom part. Step two is a lot more fun. Step two, there's I can't remember who it was that came up with this, but if I do ever come across it, I'll let you know. It was the idea of make a list of the things that make you happy. Make a list of things that you do every day. Notice how closely those two lists match. And this is the thing, is that how often do we spend time investing in the things that make us happy? And how often do we sit there and say, I need more of this in my life and I'm going to make that happen? A big key one of this for me, which I've actually literally only just done a week ago, so it's still early days, but 7 years ago, before I started my personal training brand, I was really involved in Muay Thai kickboxing. Absolutely loved it. But training for a photo shoot in the first year of my personal training business, because that's what you have to do as a personal trainer, you don't. Training for that in the first year of that, I basically had to kick Muay Thai, pun totally not intended. I had to push Muay Thai to one side for a little bit. And I always did that with the intention of picking it back up again. But again, life was busy. So I didn't pick it back up again. This week, I picked it back up again for the first time in 7 years. My arms were barely movable for 2 days. Holding a cup of tea was torture. However, I came out of that session and I nearly cried. Because I was so overjoyed at the fact that that sport just actually lights a fire under me. It sets my soul on fire, you know? And the thing is, it's like, okay, what could I do to just get 1 hour of that in a week? 1 hour. And this comes back to a very simple principle, which, you know, to all of my fellow obligers out there, is that self first is not selfish. If you are trying to craft your life, putting something in there that makes you feel alive, putting something in there that makes you feel accomplished, putting something in there that makes you feel strong or successful or happy, it's not selfish. Because by doing so, everybody else in your life gets the benefit of that. My wife saw the grin on my face when I came home on Tuesday. My stream, there's a clip from the stream. We have a mental health check-in every stream, and we rate our mental health on 1 to 5. And I was with the biggest grin on my face when we rated it at that point. I'm like, I'm a 6 today. I'm a 6 out of 5. Can't remember the last time I felt 6 out of 5. And as a result of that, everyone in my stream got a more upbeat, a more happy, a more kind of positive version of me. They got more energy from me. And the rest of my week's I had an emotional dip on the Wednesday. I think we've talked about emotional hangovers before. But the rest of my week, I've been kind of bouncing off the walls, and I'm super excited about the fact that I've booked in for another session next week, and I'm planning to see if I can pay for 10 sessions up front, just so it's in the calendar, because I don't miss appointments to other people. I miss appointments to myself, but I don't miss appointments to other people. And this is the whole idea, is that, okay, each little thing that we change, little things add up. And if we have a ton of little things that are just niggling away at us over time, those things are going to add up. Sometimes, if you're feeling miserable, if you're struggling with your life sometimes, it's not always these big obvious things. For so many people that I speak to, of course there are so many people I speak to that it is big obvious things, but for so many people that I speak to, it's not big obvious things as to why their lives, why they're unhappy. If I speak to them, in fact, I so frequently hear the phrase, oh, well, there's nothing really. There's no real problem. There's no real problem. But each person, if you were to look a little bit deeper, it's like little things here and there, like not getting any time for themselves. And I mean, the last 14 months, that one has come up more than anything. That, social anxiety, and health anxiety have been the three things I have spoken about the most this last year. Not getting any time to yourself, not spending too much time doom scrolling and not enough time reading, not getting any fresh air, not getting any exercise. You've let your food slip a little bit, and again, it was nice at first. It was cool. I love pizza. Who doesn't love pizza, But then over time, you start feeling a little bit more sluggish. The thing is, if all of these things made us feel terrible the second we did them, we'd probably be okay. Doom scrolling does. Doom scrolling makes you feel terrible the second you do it. But if all the rest of these things made us feel terrible the second we did them, we'd probably be okay. But they don't, because they only contribute for 2% of your misery, 5% of your misery here and there, little bits and pieces, and over time, these things all add up. And that's what we have to do, is because, going back to that John Lennon quote for the beginning, life is what happens when you're busy making plans. We need to make plans. We don't just need to make a plan. We need to act upon it. Knowledge isn't power. Implementation is power. A plan isn't power. An enacted plan is power. And we need to say, okay, what can I do today to make things 1% better? What can I do today to introduce 1% more love into my family? 1% more love into myself? Because again, even though those things, we're not doing them and then they immediately change us. But if we keep on adding up those little bits of 1%, of crafting our lives towards the thing that we want, then those 1% add up pretty quick. There's a graph somewhere, and I wish I'd found it now. 1% improvement every day. I'm going to try and find it whilst I'm live, which is never really goes well, but let's try it. 1% change every day. Let's see if I search for that, I should be able to get it. Change every day. 1% change every day. It's from James Clear. I'm not surprised. It's from James Clear, actually. James Clear is absolutely amazing, by the way. His book Atomic Habits is absolutely fantastic. So the power of tiny gains. If you were to get 1% better over every single day over a year, so you get 1% better, you would actually be 31.1 or 37.78 1% better or 1% worse. If you get 1% each, there we go. If you get 1% better each day for 1 year, you'll end up 37 times better by the time you're done. If you were to get 1% better every single day, you will end up 37 times better. So those 1% add up to 37,000%. Is that correct? 37,000 or 3,700? I think it's 3,700. 37 times better, maybe. If you were to get 1% worse every day, you would end up at 0.03 times what you are now. And for those who are watching on the camera, if we are watching on the podcast, I will try and hold that up to the camera. It's called The Power of Tiny Gains. Those are the curves there. And this is the whole thing, is that we're a very immediate species. We like to see immediate results. There's a video I put up on my YouTube recently talking about getting out what you put in, and the problem is it'll push us to kind of, sometimes if we get a certain result immediately, it pushes us to kind of try and double down on that, and doubling down on it doesn't always work. But if we were to achieve these tiny incremental changes, things would be so much better. We would slowly but surely craft a life that is better for us. And along the way, you might want to sit there and reassess. And this is what I've been doing for the past 4 or 5 weeks. Like, we'd be walking the dog down the canal, and Alona, my wife, can always tell when there's something on my mind. I mean, to be fair, if I'm awake is the answer to that question. If there's something on Dave's mind, if he's awake. But she'd always be able to tell if there was something on my mind. And she goes to me, "What's up?" And I'm like, "What's on your mind?" And I'm like, I'm just thinking about like how I've crafted a life that is, I should be so much happier than I am. I should be happier than I am. And it's not that I'm not appreciative of the things that are happening in my life. I'm a very privileged and lucky person, and I do acknowledge that on a regular basis. But it was all these little daily things that were making me feel worn down. The big one for me was just how much of my time I give to other people. It's a consistent problem. It's been a consistent problem for 4 years, maybe longer. It's been maybe 7. And then what I do for myself. And whenever I found myself with time for myself recently, I put that into work. I put that into trying to grow the business, trying to grow Mindset by Dave as a brand. And as I said, again, what was my personal interest, psychology, mental health, the human brain, the human condition, this became my job. It became something that I never took a break from. And that's not necessarily, there's not necessarily a problem for it to become my job. The problem is I never took a break from it. And this is the first thing I've done, obviously, put Muay Thai back in. And there's a reason for that. I can't think of anything else whilst I'm there. I have to think about what pad I'm hitting, in what order. I have to react in that moment. And for that hour, I am immersed. I am away from all of this. And that allows me then to come back to this charged up and ready to go. And that's what I've done. And that's the early stages of it, but I've identified it. And the trick going forward for me is going to be, don't fall back into that pattern again. Or if I need to do a push in work, I have that push period, but then I sit back and I actually do relax. I've been slightly obsessed recently with the idea of the point at which I can relax. And for me, that point, I'll be happy when, right? And I've said to everybody a million times, I'll be happy when means I won't be happy until. I'll be happy when. I'll be happy when. Mine was, I'll be happy when I don't have to push so hard for my social media to do well. I put a post and I can forget about it. That's already there. The thing is, I think that putting the post up and forgetting about it, I'm waiting for some sort of magical number to suggest that that's happened. And that number will always change. Putting a post up and forgetting about it, that's down to me. That's actually down to me. It's not about how many likes it gets. It's not about how many shares it gets. It's not about any of that. It's down to the fact that, okay, I'm now putting this in a box and I'm putting it over here and I'm going to go and do something else. And you know what? Of the happiest moments in my life over the last 7 years, it's been the times that I've implemented that technique. The guy from Robbie from Out of the Blank podcast, who I spoke to about 2 months ago, basically had a phrase for it: post and ghost. Post and ghost. You put the post out there and you ghost. You leave. You get out of there. You close the phone. You don't check the statistics. You don't go back to it. Okay, I'll check. If I want to put a post up and then have a week off, sweet. I'll have the week off. The week off means not constantly checking on it. Check on it in a week, and that's fine. Again, just another way in which I am complicit in creating the thing that I say that I want to avoid. And that be it. That is it. That's pretty much all we've got to say for today. It's actually got on a little bit longer than I expected. I hope if you're an experienced listener, there we go. What experienced listener? If you are a what's the word I'm looking for? Veteran listener of the podcast. Someone from, this podcast has been up under 3 names now. It was originally called Your Progress Is Our Passion. Then it became Master the Mind, Master Anything. Now it's just called the Mindset by Dave podcast. It's simple. And, if you have been here for a long time, first of all, thank you. Secondly, I hope you enjoy the new direction. If you don't enjoy the new direction, then that makes me a little bit sad, but it only makes me sad because it just means that, as I said before, the journey evolves and we need to evolve with it, right? It just means mine and your journeys evolve in a different direction. And that's sad because it's never nice to kind of to part ways or to lose people. But as I said, I've spent a lot of time over the last few months doing this soul searching, trying to decide where I want to go with things, trying to decide what me as a man rapidly approaching his 40th birthday wants to do. And there's a few things I want to do with this podcast. The primary one, though, is I want to start giving my platform to people of a marginalized position, to talk about the stories of mental health that we don't get to hear, to talk about the stories of mental health that we'd only get to hear if we were within those communities ourselves. And I suppose we're in a weird roundabout way, it comes back to what my philosophy was in 2020. Not them and us, but all of us. It's all mental health. Society, our struggles, our communication, it's all mental health. Our ability to get along with each other, it's all mental health. All these things contribute to mental health. Mental health contributes to all of these things. And that is where we're going to be going with this. And I'm excited about the journey. And I hope that you are too. I don't know how to sign off because for 180 episodes, I have signed off saying, if you master the mind, you can master anything. But you know what? All I'm going to say is this. Thank you for being here, you gorgeous human. And I will see you soon.